Well, the worst thought in the world that I could ever entertain, and of course my worst fear, was that I was a joke. A bad joke.
The beautiful, sexy actress Victoria Principal told me what she feared the most was being considered a bad joke. Why? She had not, as she said, lived as a proper woman. Victoria Principal is never dull, particularly when she talks of those improper days before she became a star on Dallas. In a moment, Victoria Principal.
I'm Cheryl Swinteens. Don't miss a moment.
Victoria Principal is a party girl turned primetime princess, one of the reigning royals of television drama. Even her name evokes elegance, graciousness, beauty, and success. She was born in 1950 in Japan. Because her father was an officer in the Air Force, the family traveled all over the world. Maybe this unusual childhood brought out Victoria's wild side. She was always accelerating through the fast lane. Too many parties, too many lovers, often famous and always rich. She lived in London with financier Bernie Kornfeld, who gave her a Rolls Royce for her 19th birthday. She was seen regularly with Frank Sinatra, football star Lance Rensel, and even the Maharaja of Polatana. She arrived in Hollywood at the age of 21, and only 6 months later got her film debut as Paul Newman's mistress in The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean. The role got her a lot of attention, but the next batch of films were all flops. Victoria herself has called The Naked Ape worse than terrible. She was disenchanted with acting and became an agent. But by 1977, she'd returned to acting. This time, she focused on television. And in 1978, she hit pay dirt. She landed the role of good-hearted Pam Ewing on the primetime soap, Dallas. Playing opposite Patrick Duffy, she quickly became a household name. Every week, millions of people tuned in to watch the Ewings fight it out in the boardroom and the bedroom. In 1979, Victoria married actor Christopher Skinner. He was 7 years her junior, not rich, not famous. The marriage only lasted 18 months. I just wanna be your everything. She made even more headlines when she dated yet another younger man, singer Andy Gibb. Gibb, who had a drug problem, died of heart failure in 1988, many years after his romance with Victoria had ended. In 1985, Victoria wed for the second time. This time, the groom was Beverly Hills plastic surgeon Harry Glassman. Victoria still acts and is a successful producer of TV movies with her own production company. She is also the woman behind her own brand of skin and hair care products. In addition, she remains happily married. It appears Victoria's wild days are over. At the time of our interview, she was living in Los Angeles with Andy Gibb. The house was cozy and inviting. It was small by Hollywood standards. After her success, she didn't move to a new and larger house, but instead she designed and added this second floor, which included her white eyelet little girl bedroom. We spoke in 1982 in the middle of her long, successful run on Dallas.
You are what is known as an Army brat or an Air Force brat, since I understand your father was in the Air Force.
Right.
And you were born in Japan, lived what?
In Puerto Rico, in England, in Massachusetts, in Florida, in Georgia.
What does this do to you?
Well, for me, what would happen is I never felt accepted. And I became somewhat withdrawn and developed an attitude which wasn't very good, which was, well, if they want to know me, they can approach me. And so it made me strong on one hand, because I was absolutely fearless about moving to another country or moving to another state, or if I wanted something to go after, it didn't matter where it was.
What has it done to you today? Are you still that way? Do you still see little signs of it?
Sometimes, if I feel inadequate, I can feel myself put a protective shield around me, which I'm sure looks from the outside arrogant, but is actually insecurity.
You raced cars. Very few women race cars. Do you still, by the way?
No.
Why did you?
The moving around, as I said, meant I didn't have very many friends. And I always desired attention. That was something I always wanted. And I always wanted to be good at something. And also I was very ambitious, but I wasn't able to live out my ambitions. I was too young, I was living at home. And so by racing cars, it was a way of drawing attention to myself. And if I drove well, once again being accepted and being thought of, maybe it's a little special.
When you drove racing cars, you had a very bad accident.
But not racing.
A
I wasn't
regular
racing.
accident.
It was just a bad accident on the streets.
Were you different when you recovered? Because you were...
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
almost died.
Well, I easily could have. I was given last rites, but aside from that, I was just lucky to escape and to get well in more or less one piece. And I was only 18, and I became very aware of my mortality during those months in the hospital. I think more aware than most teenagers are. And I felt that at any moment, perhaps, my life could be taken away from me, and that I wanted to live as much as possible from that day on. And I wanted to do everything that I'd ever wanted to do as soon as possible.
At 18.
And I did. Mm.
When you were a kid, 18, and you said you wanted to just make sure that you did everything as fast as possible. That was the period of the other Victoria principal, who went out with all the so-called all-powerful men, the Frank Sinatras, the financier who later went to jail, Bernie Cornfield. A pretty hectic life for really a little girl.
Mm-hmm.
Was that part of that whole, boy, I'm going to do it, I'm going to have it, I'm going to...
I'm sure it was. I wanted to live. And I didn't want to miss anything if it was possible not to miss it, because God forbid I should die or be hurt again in a year.
Did you miss anything?
Well, nothing I regret. No.
Does it haunt you a bit today?
Just the last year, it stopped haunting me. And my mother has a lot to do with that, God bless her. Because as I grew into my middle 20s and then my later 20s, there was often the questions were asked, and I felt a terrible sense of guilt. And there was a terrible loss of self-respect over something that I had never had a sense of guilt about. And I felt very bad about myself. And for a number of years, I think I was very self-destructive as a result of it. I didn't like myself very much, and I really felt angry at people for making me not like myself. That's the way I felt. And my mother sat me down and said, it's all right, you know, because we love you a lot. And we think whatever you did, you chose to do at that time. And she said, just tell me, is there anything you're ashamed of you want me to know about? And I said, no. She said, then what's all this about?
Tell me about your mother.
During the years I first lived out here, we had some ups and downs in our relationship, because when I was growing up, and then just after I left home, I always wanted to please her very much. And then I was caught in that cultural revolution where you were supposed to do whatever you wanted to, and you owed nothing to anyone. And unfortunately, I was one of the sheep who fell victim of that, just followed. And it hurt our relationship, because I was constantly trying to prove to her how I could do what I wanted to do, and it hurt her feelings, understandably. And yet she was still so willing to love me. And of course I felt guilty for that, and so I was angry. And we've become friends again now in the last few years. Wonderful friends again.
When you got older and you look back on that past, what did you feel then? What did you think you had done that was so terrible?
Well, the worst thought in the world that I could ever entertain, and of course my worst fear, was that I was a joke. A bad joke.
Because you had done what?
Because I had not lived in the way that a proper young woman lives, and that I had not sanctioned a relationship by being married, and that on top of that I had not apologized for it, and I'd been quite open about it.
And so people made fun of you, and you weren't good enough, you thought.
And of course, there was always that opinion that perhaps I was the kind of woman that lived off of other people, off of men. That hurts.
Hurts or hurt?
That hurt. Thank you. That hurt. It hurts when it happens, but it hurt.
When you were younger, you were attracted to, at least it seems, older,
Always, yes.
powerful, rich.
Well, I was never conscious, the richness. They were successful, powerful, intelligent men. And as often happens when you have those three factors, rich simply is the other fourth. They could help me learn to be more sophisticated because I felt very unsophisticated, and yet I lived in a very sophisticated world. And so and that's the basis of every relationship is needs.
What are the needs now?
To be with someone who encourages the child in me, because she didn't have a lot of time to play.
Next, Victoria Principal on a turning point in her life.
Watch new.
Victoria, in the early 1970s, you made 5 films, and then you quit. You totally quit acting. Why?
I was on my 4th film. I realized how dreadfully unhappy I was with myself, and also I wasn't happy with my career. It hadn't gone in the direction I'd anticipated, and I would seem to be playing a career of other women. And in my personal life, I knew that I hadn't matured properly. That from the time I was 21 on, I was in front of the camera, and I was living an image. I wasn't living whoever I was, and I wasn't sure then. Once again, the walls went up, and the veneer of being so tough and so arrogant. And inside, I was really still a little girl, and I was crumbling. And I didn't know who to turn to or where to go. And I could feel my own life slipping away, literally. I knew that if I didn't get out, I was going to end up another Hollywood tragedy.
What do you mean? Did you feel so... Did you ever think that you'd take your own life? Was it going to be
It
that kind
worried
of
me.
thing?
That's what was the turning point. And for someone who wanted to live so much, there was a morning I got up, and I tried to think of one thing that would make me happy, that was possibly going to happen that day or in the next month, or one reason to get up and get dressed and go to work, and nothing seemed worth it. And I tried to think, well, what would make me feel good? And I thought, just not to feel anything.
At what, 23?
Yeah, 24. I no longer really even wanted to live. I was giving up on everything. And I said, okay, girl, get out. And I finished the next film, and the day after, I withdrew from the Screen Actors Guild.
I'd also heard rumors that when things were really very tough, and where you didn't, I don't know, for whatever the reasons people do this, that you had a little bout with drugs, did you?
A little bout with drugs? Prescribed drugs. Yes, prescribed drugs.
You mean the sleeping pills or the uppers or the downers?
Just get up and go to sleep, sure. And that was frightening, too. I was just losing everything. I was losing my grip on everything.
How'd you turn it around?
Well,
We're not talking about that many years ago.
no,
You know, to go from
no.
there
I'm 32 as we sit
to
here,
this,
so...
you know.
Well, I was 25 when I withdrew from the Screen Actors Guild. I was 24 when this clear-cut realization came to me. And so all of a sudden, I needed a job, and I needed to pay the rent, and I needed to eat, and I needed to grow up, and I needed to know who I was, and the best way was to work very hard at something that I could use my mind with, and also earn some self-respect, and also some respect around me. And I thought I would be go to work for a producer, as a producer's assistant. And an agent, who knew me quite well, asked me to come to work in his agency, to work my way up. And it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
You loved that.
I loved it. I still love it. I do.
Are you your own agent? Can you negotiate?
I'm my
for
own
your-
manager.
Are you really?
I have
Are
a
you
wa-
tough?
I'm tough, but I'm fair. I'm not what you call a killer. There's no reason to kill. There's no one left to work with after that. So, but just tough and fair and tough.
Then why didn't you stay being an agent? Why, how did you, how did that turn into Dallas, yeah?
Well, I truly never believed I'd act again for the rest of my life, because what I did then was connect all the bad feelings with acting. That, in my mind, seemed to be the culprit. That was why things had gone wrong. And after working as an agent, there came a point in time where I was doing relatively well as an agent. And I also knew that I was happy with myself, but that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life being an agent. And I was going to go to law school for full time. And that was my decision, so I left the agency. And Aaron Spelling called and asked me to do a pilot called Fantasy Island.
He's the producer of Fantasy
Mhm.
Island and
Yes.
Charlie's Angels.
God bless Aaron. And I said no, and so he explained that I was really a very stupid girl, because by doing the pilot, it would certainly pay for a year of law school. I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. And that's how I went back to acting. I did that, and at the end of it, another part came up, and I thought, well, that'll pay for 2 years. And by the time I finished the second part, I thought, what am I doing? I am loving this. I don't in any way feel threatened now. I am loving it, and I'm making a very good salary.
You must feel like Cinderella sometimes.
I sure do.
It's interesting, that part that you play, Pamela, which has made you a star, and you've made it. You've made Pamela the star. Pamela, who is sweet,
Sweet.
demure, good.
Mm-hmm.
When you got the part, you said, I'm that girl, I'm Pamela. Did you think you were?
No, I thought, that's the part I want, and I know what I'm going to do with Pamela. I didn't think I was Pamela. Pamela's so good, and so vulnerable, and yet so invulnerable to human temptation. No, I had no illusions about that, but I liked her so much. But also, Pam isn't stupid. The role I play isn't stupid. It's just sweet.
Are you very ambitious?
I am very ambitious, yes. There always seems to be a goal that does exceed today, but I'm not, I've often wondered if I'm really ambitious or hungry. I think
what?
there's a difference. Hungry is when nothing is ever enough. And that's always worried me, if I were simply ambitious or if I were hungry.
Hungry for what? What
Well,
isn't
hungry,
enough?
it just means
Yeah,
hungry.
but what do
It
you
means
want
for
more of?
Everything. But as I said, I think I've mellowed, so I think it's strictly ambition now.
More money?
Yeah, more money, but that's security to me. It doesn't mean to buy more things, because I can't think of anything that I want that exceeds my grasp at the moment, but it's not to buy more. It's just to know that no one can take what I have away.
More fame?
Actually, I like the fame right where it is.
Do you want to have children?
Well, I really love kids. I think I waited too long, at least for me.
I read that when you were a little girl and you had no friends, you made up an imaginary playmate.
Oh, Price Hill.
What a name.
Price Hill. Well, Price Hill was this very tall, slender blonde, very model-like.
Girl.
Yes, with big blue eyes. And I always wanted to be taller, and Price was taller. And I always wanted longer legs, and Price had longer legs. So when I finally was able to have my production company, which I'd wanted for a long time, I thought, well, now that I've come to terms and I'm happy with myself, why don't I just join forces with Price? So I named Price Hill Principal.
Did you talk to her when you were a kid?
Oh, yeah. Running conversations with her, most of them in my head, but I would close my bedroom door and have conversations with her.
Do you, at this point in your life, have conversations sometimes with you?
I always talk to myself. Oh, sure. There'll be times, sometimes I know I'll get up in the morning, and we get up very early to go to work on the show. And, oh, God, how am I going to, get up. It's 4:30 in the morning. And then I'll talk to myself and say, Victoria, you remember just 5 to 6 years ago, you thought, dear God, if you would just let me work for a week, I would be so grateful. And so I slapped myself around a little.
I'm reminded of something that I read that you said, which was that you'd like to own a country.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the control thing comes. But I really would like that.
Would you be the queen?
No, I'll be a dictator.
That's nice. A nice, simple ambition.
No, queen means they still can vote, doesn't it? No, I'm teasing. No, I don't think of it like that.
See, I believe you. You are a funny lady.
Well,
It's the sweet face and the pure part and the pure role on stage and off, and yet all this stuff comes out, which is very interesting.
it's what I am.
When you think of the success that you wanted so badly, and you have it now, is it what you thought it would be?
And more.
Really?
It really is.
It hasn't
Yes.
taken anything away?
It
You know, you hear the
hasn't
people
at
say, well,
all.
I love it, but it interferes with my privacy, or
No,
it's
not on the
just a river.
contrary. On the contrary, for me, I think maybe some people, success is going to smooth out all the problems. It's going to make all their insecurities better. It's going to solve problems that they've been carrying for years and all sorts of things. And once they have success, they don't have to change because nobody will make them change. I mean, it's supposed to do everything. So I worked out most of my problems before success. And one of the major problems I had was being accepted as a working actress. And it solved that problem. And I love it. I just love it.
Vital statistics.
Victoria Principal broke up with her then boyfriend, Andy Gibb, not long after our interview, and he died 6 years later from heart failure. She long ago lost that stigma of a checkered past, but then a bad reputation is hardly fatal these days. In fact, if you don't have a bad reputation, there are plenty of people in Hollywood who would be happy to invent one for you just to get you started. Victoria Principal.
I'm Cheryl Swinteens. Don't miss a moment.
Victoria Principal is a party girl turned primetime princess, one of the reigning royals of television drama. Even her name evokes elegance, graciousness, beauty, and success. She was
Well, the worst thought in the world that I could ever entertain, and of course my worst fear, was that I was a joke. A bad joke.
was born in 1950 in Japan. Because her father was an officer in the Air Force, the family traveled all over the world. Maybe this unusual childhood brought out Victoria's wild side. She was always accelerating through the fast lane. Too many parties, too many lovers, often famous and always rich. She lived in London with financier. The beautiful, sexy actress Victoria Principal told me what she feared the most was being considered a bad joke. Why? She had not, as she said, lived as a proper woman. Victoria Principal is never dull, particularly when she talks of those improper days before she became a star on Dallas. In a moment, Annie Kornfeld, who gave her a Rolls Royce for her 19th birthday. She was seen regularly with Frank Sinatra, football star Lance Rensel, and even the Maharaja of Polatana. She arrived in Hollywood at the age of 21, and only 6 months later got her film debut as Paul Newman's mistress in The Life and Times of Judge Roy Bean.